Well, good morning, everyone. It is 10 o'clock, so we're going to get started here today. Thank you for joining us for our October session of the Certified Livestock Managers webinar series. Just a couple housekeeping items before we kind of get into everything today. Our next CLM webinar will be December 1st from 10 a.m. to 11:30, and that topic will be on manure testing and interpretation. The link is right there. It's go.osu.edu/CLM. You can also access that through our website if need be, or reach out to one of us and we can send it to you directly. And then just kind of a little update. Today's webinar is brought to you by the OSU Extension Water Quality Team. All of us are listed there, covering Williams, Fulton, Lucas counties is Heather Torlina, which she is joining us today. Paulding, Defiance, and Van Wert is Rachel Cochran. Ugleys, Allen, and Mercer is myself, Jocelyn Rubel. We do have a couple vacant positions in Putnam, Hancock, Hardin, Crawford, Wyandotte, Sandusky, Seneca, and Erie. Both those spots are vacant. And also joining us today is Amber Emmons, and she covers Henry, Wood, and Ottawa counties. And that is the link to our website. You can find more information on us, our specialties, anything you want to know, or just reach out to us. Like I said, the links for our webinar series are on there, story maps, a whole bunch of good information, and kind of hopefully answers to any questions you might have. So today's webinar, we have two speakers for you today. Joining us, we have Glenn Arnold with OSU Extension, and then we also have Andrew Kloppenstein from down in Fabe at OSU. So with that, Glenn, I'm going to turn it over to you if you would like to start us today.
Okay, I think I've got everything up. So I'll be happy to talk to you for the next period of time. We're going to talk about the North American Manure Expo that we hosted this summer in Wauseon area. I've got 2008, 2016, and 2025, and those have been the three that I've been partially involved with, mostly as an attendee at the first one, but running the 2016 and 2025 Expo. And these are the North American Manure Expo is owned actually by the Wisconsin Manure Applicators Association. And about every fourth year, and if its existence, it's in Wisconsin. And then the other 3 years, it rotates around. So it'll be in Nebraska next year, be in Canada the year after, and then they just selected North Carolina for the year after that. And so it takes you to different regions, different areas of the country, different methods that they handle manure, and go from there. Okay, this is kind of what the logo looked like. We hosted in July 30th and 31st, and those are the same dates as what they have next year in Nebraska. We picked the Fulton County Fairgrounds to host this. This is just an aerial view of the fairgrounds, lays right on I-80, I-90 interstate that goes through northern Ohio. And if you look at the three areas that we've got the yellow highlighted area is basically the very large parking lot associated with the fair, and that's where we had all of our activities. Both the cars were parked there and the outdoor exhibit was there. Then we had the two red areas. The lower one that's next to the parking lot is owned by the Threshers Association, so we had hoped to do most of our demos there, and then the other field was kind of an emergency backup field in the event it rained, which it did. So we got a chance to use them all. This is kind of a picture view of what the event looks like. This is actually from 2 years ago in New York, but you basically have 4 smaller educational tents spread out around. You have a large exhibitor tent here, and then you have a lot of outdoor exhibitors because this is an outdoor show. So they'll bring a lot of pieces of equipment set up to display, much like your farm science review, but this is all manure related in this. And then there's Sterlina, is the official cow of the Fulton County Fairgrounds. There's a story behind her, but she's basically on a trailer and she's available every year there. So we had to get a picture of her somehow in this presentation today. If you look at the expo, the first day is tours, and they usually run to about 11 o'clock, 11:30 in the morning. So we had 4 tours that we had lined up. The first tour was to N.A.M.E.'s composting facility, and then it went to a beef composting facility after that. And these are people movers. Uh, these are owned by the threshers, and we got to use them as a part of our field day. And then Nate had them stored at his place, so they used them that day as well. If you've never been to Nate Andre's composting facility, this machine looks kind of like it was put together by a committee, but it was so fascinating. I was there one day when they were throwing 10-pound bags of potatoes into this machine because the potatoes were outdated by the company standards and they couldn't sell them anymore. And so out one side of this machine comes bags of or comes mashed potatoes, and out the other side of the machine came those potato bags. And then I was there a couple of days later, and with a very small change, they were throwing in cans of green beans into this machine. So he had pallet after pallet after pallet of green beans that the company had canned, and then they decided they were 1/10 of 1% short on salt that they wanted to have in with those green beans. So they tossed them all. Nate takes those, and using this very same machine, you had green beans coming out one side, and you had the cans that contained those green beans coming out the other side. Really fascinating. He ends up with these very large mounds of compost. He turns these, he grinds these, makes an excellent product for land application. So really neat to see how it's done. That same tour would have stopped at the beef operation not very far away, and then they do something similar with their beef manure and the fact that they compost their beef manure, and they have a very large shed that they store their manure in, large enough you can turn a semi around inside. So they had 2 or 3 of these types of operations that do a lot of composting up there, thanks to Eric Reeker's efforts years ago. And so as part of the tour, another tour group that headed out went to Bridgewater, and they went to Bridgewater with 2 things they wanted to see. One was the digester that Bridgewater has. You can see I've got it labeled right there. Just a large flat area where manure passes through over a period of time, and they collect both gases and other stuff off of there. And then the other thing we wanted to see at the Bridgewater Dairy, in addition to walking by lots of cows and things like that, was they had an underground pipeline that they had buried. It's somewhere between 3 and 5 miles long, and it's a 10-inch heavy-duty pipe, and then there's these upstands in various fields. So when it comes time to apply those manure to the field, they can use these upstands. So if you have a commercial manure applicator that needs to hook up to that field, they can do that. They simply would unscrew this top, turn the valves that are in these other 2 um, stands that you can see here. You can reach down in there and change the valve setting. Or down the road, if they have a 360 rain that they'd want to hook up to this pipe, they could. Or if they want to hook a pivot irrigation system up to this pipe, they could. But the thought process is to transport manure to more distant fields using an underground system rather than having to put that on wheels with tanks or having to close roads with hoses and things like that. So it's got to be deep enough, and it's got to be frost is not going to be a concern. And I can see by the air hose connection they have on the top here that they can also send a pig through there to blow the manure out of that pipe if they choose to do so at the end of the year. Your biggest concern is settlings like sand and stuff like that in these pipes. So you have to do something to keep them cleaned out. Then another of the tours would have gone to these Rain 360 units that we have. Quite a few of those in Northwest Ohio. Very popular. We are very level, so it's very easy for these machines to operate. They've really done a good job, I think. They only handle maybe 200 gallons of liquid per minute, but if they can run continuously like they've been able to do, and then we're coming off a 3rd consecutive pretty dry growing season. So these units have been able to be out in these fields running 24/7 for extended periods of times, upwards of 30 days for some of them. So if you can do that, then you can move a lot of liquid. And as also a result, you get a little taller corn, a little better filled out corn because you're trying to put some moisture on these corn plants down along the root system multiple times during the growing season. So it seems to be pretty well received, and a lot of interest. All the tours that we had were sold out, so that worked out well. And then there was a fourth tour that we talked about ditches and water quality, and I didn't have any good pictures of that, so I'm going to pass on that picture here today. Well, once the tours are finished on the first morning, then everyone came back to a large manure pond at Oakshade Dairy. And then we have what we call the pit agitation demonstrations. So these are what we would call sticks, where you put these long sticks in the manure pond. The purpose is to stir it up as much as you can. Now, these were nowhere to be found 30 years ago because ponds weren't that big. And then eventually, as ponds got bigger, then these sticks showed up. And eventually, as ponds got even bigger, these sticks were inadequate. So people went to boats. And here on the left side, we've got a N.A.M.E boat. This is a big red one that's here. And then on the left of that is a Bazooka Farm Star boat that was running. And so we had, after we let each of these pieces of equipment demo individually, then we just had them all turn on and demo. And you can see on the bank here where the equipment came in and out of the pond a couple times during practice and stuff. And it worked pretty well. The only thing that really went wrong is when the N.A.M.E people lifted their nozzle out of the manure pond and shot the Bazooka people with a pretty hefty amount of manure there. And then they did it again a little bit later, so you knew it was an accident. So there's some hurt feelings there, but hopefully we get that under control in future expos and stuff. Wouldn't want to start this as a regular. About 6-8 years ago, they had the Manure Expo in Wisconsin, and the operator of the boat actually did accidentally shoot the crowd, and I think something like 75 people had to have a change of clothes shortly after that. So again, the purpose of these are to stir up the solids on the bottom as we work with sand, as we work with the silage has a lot of solids in it. We've got to get these stirred up so these ponds can maintain their capacity. So that's our really primary purpose, is to demo this equipment, let people see what the different equipment's got available, and go from there. As we continue the first day, the topic that we had selected that we wanted to emphasize in Ohio was the use of rapid manure transfers, or also frac tanks and dumpster tanks. We are probably as progressive here in Ohio as any place that they have in the country in trying new methods to move manure greater distances. Partly because we have pressure to do that, and partly because it's just good manure management. So this is a large frac tank from Fry Brothers that he brought, and they were the primary commercial manure applicator in charge of helping with all the demonstrations that we did. And this is just a short video of how their big 27,000 gallon frac tank works. They can set this up alongside the road that they're alongside the field that they are putting manure on, and you can have semi trucks come in. You can see they've got a young person that's going to connect that, and then they've got a pump that's built into the semi of the pulls that frac tank, and that's going to create the vacuum to pull the manure off of these semi trucks and put that in that frac tank. And then that's also going to provide the power to charge the hose and run that manure out to the field. So that was rather an unusual frac tank design, and we thought that was something that we wanted to show off. So we made sure to have that set up. Another demo that we talked about is these rapid manure dumpsters. And these are the ones where the semis pull up alongside these and dump immediately into the frac tank or the dumpster tank, and go from there. Again, you can pump right out of these into the fields, charge the drag hose, and make them go. So for our field day, we had two of these. We had Braun brought their big one, and then Phil's Pumping out of Wisconsin had theirs. And you can see the frac tank demonstrating how that goes down. This is from the Paulding Dairy. We really appreciate Trent Stoller chipping in on this. So what they basically did was show how rapidly you can unload these tankers. Now this is, I believe, is a 24-inch nozzle. So these things started out at 6-inch nozzles and went to 12s, and then went to two 12s on top of each other, and now they're up to a 24 direct discharge. So the other thing you can see in this video is that they're using water instead of manure. And we actually had to, because when we looked at the weather forecast, we had greater than a 50% chance of more than a half inch of rain in the next 24 hours. So for us to surface apply this manure, we would be running against the law at the expo. So we made sure that we, at the last minute, switched from manure to water to make this all work. And then we've got at the very bottom, we had an auctioneer's truck that we use for the talking and the announcements, and that really went pretty well for us. Really did. So again, that's we had all these lined up right next to the outdoor exhibit area, so it made it very easy for the crowd to follow what we were wanting to do. Then the third demo that we had was the tanker transferring to or from a truck, and the truck transferring to or from. And we had one of these on demo, and I didn't get a good picture of it when we had it, but this would be an example of what we do. And then here's probably another one where the pipe is on the track or the truck itself, and then the tractor is going to pull underneath of it to receive its load of manure. And this is just a method of manure transfer that is not maybe as fast as the dumpsters that we have, but usually what you have is you have a commercial applicator that sets up with a particular system, whether their dad did that ahead of them or whether that's something that they when they bought some used equipment, that's what they started with. But whatever system it is, you'll see commercial applicators will stick that with that for a period of time. And then maybe they'll eventually make a change. And if they do, then it'll be a pretty major change because you'll have to retrofit all of your semi tankers, or you have to retrofit your manure hauling equipment, whatever it's going to be to make that go. So again, this is just a demo, the types of rapid manure transfer that we get into here in Northwest Ohio, and let others see it. And I had a chuckle because we even had people from Southern Ohio had not seen some of these transfer systems used before. So it was a good opportunity for other parts of even the state of Ohio to see what some of our folks do up here in Northwest Ohio. Then staying on that first day, another demo that we did that I thought was pretty important to have was this confined space manure pit simulator. And to be brutally honest, this is more of how to recover bodies from a manure pit than it is to rescue them, because usually when we get into these types of situations, either the person in the pit is drowned or has been overcome by hydrogen sulfide or something else. And this is a mobile lab that I saw a few years ago come to Ohio. It's from Iowa. And they did a nice job talking about how the system works. I had some volunteer fire department show up that day to go down into this confined pit and rescue a dummy, and just talked about the need for the right equipment to pull up. If you're gonna get a hold of a 200-pound body, you're going to have block and tackle to get that up out of there. So they kind of talked about how you set that up, the equipment necessary, and it's kind of like I said, a topic that most of us don't like to discuss, but it was really good because that way a lot of people in the state and surrounding states got exposure that this is available. You can bring this out. Nationwide was a big part of getting this out for us. And then what they did then later on that night is they did work with the Fulton County Volunteer Fire Department, and there might have been some others involved. Or I shouldn't say the Fulton County, it's the Wasion. And there were some other fire departments involved as well, I believe. So they did some practice demos that evening. So it made it good use of the equipment, got more exposure to it. We can all use practice on these types of things. And just like we're getting a lot of practice on field fires in Ohio this fall. And then when to wrap up the final demo of the first day, this was a hose release demo that we do. And this was started in Wisconsin just a few years ago. And essentially, we want to talk about the danger these high pressure hoses. When they're laying along the road or when they're out in the field, to us non-manure applicator people, they look pretty safe. Yeah, they're filled up and they're you can stand on top of them and not make a dent. And they deal with pressures of probably close to 250 pounds or pounds per square inch at the pump, and maybe dropping down to as low as 40 psi out into the field. But this is SnapTight was able to provide us a hose, and we want to do this demo to explain the dangers. So appreciate Francis Springer uh, creating a dummy here. We've got him strapped on there. His name is Rip, R-I-P, because we kind of knew what was going to happen to him. So we put this out in the field and we all kept a proper distance back. And we just wanted to explain to people this is the potential danger when these hoses break loose. Now we removed the 10-pound connector that you would typically have on the end of that hose because we didn't want to blow off and hit anybody. But it just a good reminder of some of the dangers, in addition to the gases, in addition to some of the other issues we run into. This is just a reminder of that. So in Wisconsin, they use 90 pounds of pressure. In New York, they could only get up to 40 pounds of pressure. So here in Ohio, since Wisconsin did 90 pounds of pressure, we did 97 pounds of pressure. We could have gone up to another 50 pounds and it would have been even worse. But it's just to show people. And a lot of times, people who are unfamiliar with agriculture, they'll drive across hoses on most unusual ways. They'll drive around road closed signs, drive across hoses that are full, and then eventually those hoses do rupture. Maybe not that day, but we've weakened them sufficiently by driving over them that they will burst. So we just want everybody to be safe. At the end of the day, we want to be able to go home. And the gentleman that sets these up used to be in charge of a commercial manure application system, and that was always his goal. So why we're doing all this, people always have opportunities to do the trade show. Basically we have educational sessions as one part of the Manure Expo, the trade shows another part of the expo, and then the demonstrations are a third part of the expo. So this is equipment built in Ohio and Indiana, and it was commonly used. It's just very popular for people to see that. And then this is another system that showed up. This guy, you can fill this tanker with 6,000 gallons, and then he's got an arm on this thing that'll shoot manure 250 feet into a field. Now, there's not a lot of times we would use that. He was actually going to a fire convention in Canada when he left us. But when I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking of the field fires that we were dealing with in Ohio and Putnam County in Northwest Ohio, something like that would be a beast to have if you had it at the right place at the right time. So again, he was able to demo that, shooting that out into this open field. I don't have any pictures of the actual working, but I did have, we do have a frac tank beside him, and I think that's an 8-inch line that he could empty that whole tanker in just a couple of minutes through it. So again, you could go see equipment that you're not commonly going to see in your part of the state, perhaps. And this guy just does the opposite. Instead of adding water to manure, he's taking manure out of the water. So he had a solids separator, and we've had several of those demoed, and you see them on dairy farms especially. And so he's sucking water out of this frac tank behind him, and he's pumping that water back into the frac tank. And then meanwhile, he's removing solids as he goes. So again, just a demonstration opportunity to see that at the expo. It's part of what we do. When we go to the second morning, we start out with educational programs. We had 4 tents, and we had approximately room for, I think we probably had about 60 chairs in each tent. So room for 240 people, and they were pretty full. So we were pretty happy with that. Of course, it started raining during the middle of the night, so everybody had to get in the rain and climb under the tent. But the topics, we had topics were in agronomy, safety and regulations, water quality, and composting technology. So we had quite a bit of information, a lot of good speakers, scheduled them in at 30 minutes each. So again, if you had questions, this was an opportunity to get them answered. And then right after the educational programs, we would have normally started with the liquid demo, or excuse me, the solid demos in the morning. The rain delayed some of the application and also interfered with the drone being able to get some pictures. But this is a chance that companies have to show off their equipment. You know, there's not too many Jasper stainless steel tanks in our area, but it was nice to see them filled up, running, lifted out of the ground, see what type of applicator toolbar that they had on the back of these things, what type of a distributor they had, or chopper pump or whatever term, and how much tractor it's going to take to pull these bad boys. It's always a learning experience. That's why you got to have that two-way interaction between people at the event and the people that represent the companies. And then Oxbow was there, and their equipment is something that fits well with more of the urban distribution of biosolids, perhaps. But again, you don't know till you see it. So they were able to demo both their liquid and their solid equipment that they had, and make that happen. Always neat to see these things come into the expo. The trucker pulls in, detaches the trailer, takes the chains off, climbs up in this thing with a key and drives it off the trailer, and then hooks up and heads out of town. So it's pretty nice. And then he basically says, well, here's the keys if you want to drive it. So it gives all of us a little hope to be a manure applicator at some point. This big boy was there. Again, this is something for emptying lagoons and stuff, reaching out in, and it's got its place in some of the larger ponds, and N.A.M.E makes this, and again, a big impressive piece of equipment. And then on the second day, the wrap up of the demos is basically our manure spill and stream mitigation efforts. And this is a picture of Kevin Erb, who's kind of led that for many, many years. And even though I taught ours this year, it basically shows, you know, we just put together a spill, and then we put together a response on how you contain it, who you call, look at what tillage will do to interfering with the flow of manure off a field, look at bubbling machines to mitigate ditch water after you've got manure into that ditch, how you can use a trash pump to shoot water up into the air to help to get rid of the ammonia that's in that water and to add oxygen back in. So again, these are just things that are helpful, good reminders, and to share things that went wrong. You know, a lot of commercial manure applicators are there. They all had their own stories. You could see them talking amongst themselves from time to time when a topic came up. And then when we did get done with the expo, we had promised to manure the fields that we used. So this was the Bogart field. That would be the field that was furthest to the north. So Fry Brothers came in there, thanks to Bridgewater Dairy providing the manure, and coated that field with manure right before they tilled it in. And then the same was done with the Threshers field that was right next to the fairgrounds. And so they both got coated in manure, and that was kind of a method of helping to pay for the rental of their ground. Because again, these guys had to plant wheat so we would have the field available, or they had not to plant double crop soybeans so the field would be available. So they all had to contribute in some way to make this work out for us. And this is where it's going to be next year, July 28th to 30th, Wayne County Fairgrounds in Nebraska. So for those of you that have an interest in attending something like this, Nebraska is not all that far away. It'd be a chance to go check this out. Or like I said, the year after that, it's going to be up in Ontario, Canada. So it'll be within 2 hours of me up here in Northwest Ohio. And there's a group called the Media Annex out of Canada that we have a contract with that for the next several years that helps to promote the show, helps to contact the demo, all the companies that are going to demo and make things go a lot easier for the rest of us. So that's always been a very, very big help to have. So you can go to this website, North American Manure Expo, and all this information's there. And then eventually the schedule and the speakers still have the Ohio people in there, but eventually you'll be able to see what Nebraska has to offer. And with that, that wraps up my comments I was going to have on this. we didn't get to demo what Ohio's most famous for, and that's the use of our manure on growing crops. With the rain that we had that night, we couldn't use the field that we had planned on the original demos, so we had to switch to Plan B, go to the wheat field across the road and down the street from us. But we made her work.
I was going to say the event seemed to run pretty well. Minor to no visible hiccups, right? To anyone that didn't know any better. So yeah, I think it
If you didn't
was
know it, it's like a wedding. If you didn't know any better,
yes.
think it.
Yes.
Some of the other hiccups, since we have a couple minutes of time, when it rained that night, it messed up the field that we were going to go to for the Rain 360. So the phone was ringing that night about 9 o'clock, and the company that was hosting said, "Hey, there's another field that's only 3 minutes more drive than the original field, and that field's going to be fine to run in tomorrow." So we really made a lot of last second changes like that. All we had to do is let the bus driver know that morning, and let the host know that we were headed that way. And again, everybody works together on these projects to make them come to fruition.
It's like a well-oiled machine after so long. It seems
I don't
like
know about that, but always experience, always experience. It was pretty hot leading up to it. I remember how much everybody sweated in those days leading up to that rain. One of our speakers talked about hitch pins, proper tie down of loads and things like that, how the rules change once that load reaches 10,000 pounds. And I thought that was just a pretty interesting topic. So we made sure we got him in there.
All right. So I have 25 minutes to go through this.
you can have as long as you like.
Oh, all right.
Or as little as you'd like too. It doesn't matter. We're flexible here.
Okay. All right. So Andrew Kloffenstein with Ohio State Ag Engineering, and I'm going to talk today on the high clearance robotic irrigation or irrigator for in-season nutrient management. And we've been doing research on this for a few years now, and we were working with 360 Yield Center and talking about some of the um, technologies or things they were coming out with, and they had come out with this unit, and then we saw an opportunity. And when we talk about different aspects of manure management, um, there's a couple different ways we look at it, and most people want to say it's a problem, but there is always an opportunity in every problem. And how we look at that obviously drives people's attitudes towards that. And we also have another big issue in that we have issues with nutrients, and we have different nutrients that we try to manage in season and those that we try to manage out of season. And we were trying to find a way to manage these nutrients in a more efficient and environmentally friendly manner. So as we look at manure, and Glenn could do a really good job covering um, cost and probably add to what I'm going to talk about. It takes about a penny and a half a gallon to apply manure, and that's always a fixed cost. And we can talk about that going up and down, but we are always looking at applying manure at our bookends of the growing season. So either spring or late autumn, and the direction of liquid at that time is always down. So down towards our field drainage tile or down the waterway. And we need to find a way to try and put on those nutrients, ideally in liquids, when the direction of water is up um, and being used. So traditional application has always been limited to pre-plant or post-harvest agronomic crops. So this is the high clearance robotic irrigator from 360 Yield Center, and I'm going to talk through some of the different specs and different aspects of that unit and how we are actually applying that research here at Ohio State. So we came up with an objective and applied for a grant to demonstrate in-season application of commercial and animal nutrient sources. Um, and water as a unified strategy to reduce nutrient runoff while improving yield. And that primary grant went through NRCS CIG. And then we had an additional grant, at least here in Ohio, through H2 Ohio to demonstrate the animal nutrient portion of this. And we partnered with Iowa State University to complete this project, and they are primarily focused on animal nutrients, and while we're on the commercial nutrient side. So some of the specs of this, it has 3,000 feet of 3-inch HDPE hose. You get roughly 200 gallons a minute at 120 psi. You can run slightly less than that. It always depends how your specific operation is configured, and we'll talk about how that is done here at OSU. You can have a 60 or an 80-foot boom. What is pictured is an 80-foot boom with 16 drops that are 60-inch on center. So every row gets nutrients applied or liquid. And that machine can be configured for different spacings as well. It is run off a 24 horsepower diesel engine with a 300-gallon tank. It takes about half a gallon an hour, roughly, depending on ground conditions, terrain, crop height, maturity. Obviously, it takes more to run the unit when the corn crop is fully mature and you're pulling the drops through it than when the corn is only a couple foot tall. So all electric drive, three-wheel drive, and that front tire on the front is the steering tire. All electric, 56 volt, and then a 12 volt control system. Base station, you can run essentially any electric to that. Top ground speed is a very fast 0.45 miles per hour, so 8 inches a second. Range is 1 to 8 inches, but typically 2 to about 7.5, 8 inches is depending on your flow rates. So lots of different sensors on this machine for control. This machine is fully autonomous and moves through the field based off a set of paths. You have input pressure and flow and valve that you can control both at the skid and at the well site, depending on how it's configured. The smallest orifice in the entire system is a 3/4 inch orifice, so very large orifice, and we will talk about how we manage different solids through this. And then it bands the nutrients at the bottom, so it leaves a 15-inch band. And we have a manure manifold, so a set of knives at the bucket or distribution bucket on the machine that helps keeps those orifices clean. And then we have the ability to inject any liquid nutrient into the system. And then we'll also talk about a solid injection system that is coming here soon that we are testing here at Ohio State. So this is an example video. So as the machine goes out, we have a backbone, which is exhibited. It lays the hose out and then picks the hose back up. At no point do we drag the hose. We water the outside 20 feet on either side in the case of an 80-foot machine. And then when we drive back toward the center, we water the middle of the machine. So you never drive, quote, in wet feet. And this allows you to keep from creating ruts. So as you're going outside, and then coming back the middle. Another beautiful thing about this machine is the ability to do any field shape and size. When we start talking about this as a really big benefit of this, traditional center pivot systems or even dragline, you're really limited on some of the different field shapes and sizes that you have. But this machine allows you to have a backbone and then to go out and come back, and you can have multiple risers. You can move the unit around a little bit depending on what you're trying to do. But typical field size is they recommend 160 acres. Now, depending on how that is laid out, you can get quite a bit larger than that. But again, you're limited by that 3,000 feet of hose that you're able to use to connect back to your home point. So as we have this unit, we've done lots of different demonstrations. This is one demonstration we did at Farm Science Review, and we injected blue dye, and that was, quote, our manure source into the water stream. And as you can see out from the pictures, the banding effect that it has. So we, over the 3 days of the show, we created very blue bands right at the base of the plant, but this demonstrated really, really well that banding effect and the ability to inject the nutrients. And then during the growing season, this was a year ago, out at the rain unit. And what I really want to pull out is as we're going past these crops, we do have that banding effect, but how quickly that liquid is absorbed into the soil. So this is a low volume machine, but we also are not in a typical center pivot putting those liquids into the air. We're creating an aerosol, sort of to speak, to allow um, those all to be down inside the canopy, and you keep your um, nutrients going down into the soil. You don't have evaporative losses, and you don't have, quote, near the smell or odor that you would have if you're applying nutrients. As you look back here, how quickly that those liquids go down into the soil. We have had 0 incidents in our case of anything hitting a field tile, and that really goes back to it's a low volume machine. Now, you could have a case where it would get to the tile, but it would have to be early on in the growing season, and you'd have to have some pretty significant drought conditions for that to occur. This machine is all controlled through your phone. So as we look at this, this is a few different screenshots of my phone while operating the rain unit. Once again, if this unit does not have cell phone service or loses GPS or connection back to the base station, the machine stops. So lots of redundancy built into that. So typical setting, we set in inches what application rate you would want. So in this case, if you look at this, it's at a 0.5 or a ½ inch, and then you have your rate in gallons per minute that the machine is actually seeing, and then actual, and it will adjust based off what you're injecting. So if we had this green button turned on down here, right next to manure, that would actually take that into account if we had a set point of 1,000 gallons per acre, if you notice the units there. So we are able to run diagnostics and control this unit at all times, and it has a lot of um, ability to work through different issues remotely before you would ever have to go out to the field. So our station, we run off a well here at the Molly Caron Ag Center, and that unit, as we look at it, we come out of this well, we have my laser pointer, we come out of this well, and we would come through a valve and then come down and around and go into the booster skid. So that is the water side. We do have the ability, we have this tote here. This was when we were injecting 32% or 28% nitrogen into the water stream, and that's run by this little pump. You can also see it better in this picture that injects into the water stream. This other line that is just to the left, that is our manure injection, and that comes out of this frac tank, which represents our lagoon or pit. And we have a grinder, a municipal waste grinder pump, and that sizes any solids down to a 1/4 inch and then pushes that and injects it into the water stream. So that also is controlled by the skid. So we can blend that and then send it out to the rain unit. One example we have locally here in Ohio is Ryan Smitmeyer, Owl Creek Dairy in Darke County, and he has 2 lagoons, one for his manure and then one that he just purely harvests rainwater and pulls that out and blends it. 3 million gallon manure lagoon and then an 8 million gallon water reservoir. And he blends those two and applies year round. And one of the challenges to keep from drilling a well, he harvests as much water as he can, both from runoff water and water there locally, and recycles that and puts it back onto his field during the growing season. So obviously everyone asked about infrastructure costs. This is what Ryan had at his dairy, and this changes all the time based off what you already have existing. So, but just to give an idea, the biggest cost he had was that 8 million gallon reservoir. And again, this was specific to him. Most dairy operations are already going to have reservoirs or pits to pull out of, or lagoons. And in this case, he wanted more water to be able to water longer into the growing season and cover more acres. As we look at a close-up of the skid, this is he has his 3-inch water inlet, and then has a check valve, and then has a 2-inch water inlet, very similar to what we had. We have flow meters on both of those. Both of those get mixed and go through the valves, and the valves are separate, and then they go into this booster pump and go out to the rain unit. One thing that our skid, as well as Ryan's, has here is this manure backflush valve, and that periodically will run water mixture back through and flush that system to keep it clear. But all of this is controlled through VFD pumps, and allows you to get that adjusted, and also that data is also being recorded. So as we look at this, we have our green line, which is the water inlet, so roughly 140 gallon a minute, and then we have here around 50 gallon a minute manure, and then you can total those two up, and we're just shy of 200 gallon. And if we look at the set point, he is trying to maintain a 1/4 inch of application, and he is trying to put on 2,000 gallon per acre of manure. So as we look at that and we do the math, total, we roughly is 27,000 gallons per acre, and roughly 2,000 of that gallon per acre, we want that to be manure. So it is going to adjust and apply the VFDs in those pumps to get that maintained balance and hit that 1/4 inch. So we see roughly a 30% manure blend for this application. So if we go back to that 195 gallon, that's about roughly where we were at. And these off points are where it gets to the headland and then goes to the next pass. So moving back to some of the research that we are doing here at Ohio State, I'm not going to cover this based off time. Don't have time to cover all the Iowa State results, but we have 2 different sites. We have Beck's hybrids. We have a paired watershed with instrumentation for both surface water and subsurface tile drainage. And we use conventional commercial fertilizers, and in accordance with the tri-state fertilizer recommendations. And we in any in-season nutrient management, we use the high clearance robotic irrigator to put those nutrients on. And then we have field 7 at Molly Caron Ag Center, and this is randomized block design or complete block design. And we have 3 treatments. We have commercial fertilizer application for N.A.M.E with water coming naturally from weather events. Then we have in-season nutrient application using the high clearance robotic irrigator, and then irrigation. And then in-season nutrient management again, but we're doing 2/3 of the recommended rate. So this is what those field paths look like. We have 6-inch lay flat hose that comes out to our home point. This is in red. And then we have 2 different fields at Molly Caron. That first field I talked about was field 7. That's the strips up here on the north side. And then on the bottom side over here, 8A, that is our sandbox, in which we get to apply and do different techniques before we try and further them maybe on a grant or different things we're trying to look at. Beck's hybrids, we are coming from a well, and that comes down, follows this red line again, 6-inch lay flat, and we are on the south side of this field, and they are completely isolated watersheds. This north half is conventional practices, and this south half is irrigated. So the first year we had some challenges with getting everything in place, just with COVID, and the supply chain. We didn't get a full season of watering, so we didn't start till August. But we did complete 5 passes, got on just shy of 1.5 inches of rain, or well, water, and we did have a modest increase in yield, but again, very modest, and we were really dry in June and July where it could have really made a big difference. So this has an asterisk, but we were able to get started and applying during the growing season. 8A, our sandbox field, we were able to do a randomized complete block design and looking at different nitrogen rates and putting that on with the rain unit. And when we look at the paired nitrogen treatments, so 220, and you look at watered versus non-watered, every paired treatment we did have a statistical difference versus watered versus non-watered, which isn't surprising. But again, the differences were very small compared to if we would have had this the entire year. What we also noticed was 170 was the optimum nitrogen application rate. And if you see that, there was no statistical difference between 220 and 170. And that was the same both in irrigated and non-irrigated. In 2024, our first full growing season with the rain unit. So just a year ago, we had 5.5 inches applied in field 7 for corn, over 11 applications, and we were able to apply all our nitrogen through the rain unit for the irrigated portion. When we talk about the conventional, that was put on typical side dress or weed and feed, and 5.5 inches is a tick higher than normal. Typically, we would suggest you would only get 4.5 inches of water on a year, just depending on how early you start watering. And then 8A, we had soybeans. That was our sandbox. We got on 4.5 inches, 6 applications. And then we never watered over at Beck's in 2024. When we look at, we started pulling ears there at the end of July, and this is what we were seeing, non-irrigated versus irrigated. So we knew there was going to be some differences. And we also had weather that was going to affect that as well. We were in drought. Roughly a month later, we pulled ears again. We took them from our low and high CPU, so our lowest productivity and our highest productivity zones. And as you can see, there are some major differences in that yield. And this is what we calculated based at that time. And then our soybeans, we were starting to see significant differences in that from the field to standing at the field edge. The non-irrigated were fully mature, and we still had full health, and everything looked good on the irrigated side. And so we take imagery throughout the growing season, and this is that imagery. And this was the same for both corn and soybeans. But as you look at this, the non-irrigated, the corn is this north half, and the beans down here, those were fully mature and ready to be harvested. And our beans and our corn were both alive and kicking. And that has to deal with that irrigation. So water is always key to keep obviously a crop alive and growing and generating more yield. So results, this was really telling as we look at this second full year. Irrigated, we had 233. Irrigated with 2/3 of nutrients was 237. And then non-irrigated 189. So we saw statistical difference between irrigated and non-irrigated. But what was really exciting is, again, this 2/3 of nutrients slightly out yielded the full nutrient package, but there is no statistical difference. So we were able to cut those nutrients and see no degradation in yield. As we look at the growing season, again, it was really dry. August, we had very small amounts of rain, as well as July. And it was, as we look at this graph, we were extremely warm during those times. As we look at total inputs, we use 773 gallons of diesel to run the irrigator for this growing season across 71 acres. And we used just shy of 26,000 kilowatts kilowatt hours of energy for the electric to run the base station and the pumps. As we look at 8A, this really gets people's attention. We had 86 bushel versus 50 bushel. We used 211 gallons of diesel. This was only on 11 acres and roughly just shy of 3,500 kilowatt hours. And as we see this really big number, so it's 36 bushel, about a third of this was from a weather event. We had a hurricane late in the season, and we also had poor quality crops, and that weather event caused there to be yield losses for that crop that was non-irrigated. But again, we deal with shatter loss on I'd say 1 to 2 times out of every 5 years we're dealing with issues of shatter loss. And again, we don't see that as prevalent when we're with that irrigated crop. So coming in 2027, tentatively, there's this dry skid, and this allows you to inject any dry product into the water stream. And as we look at this, has just a Gandy system on top, and that drops it down into this tube. And we're going to have another video here in a moment. But this has a set of scales on it and allows you to constantly be calibrating. You can put MAP, DAP, rye, wheat, peas, any cover crop you could come up with, any fertilizer product, gypsum, you can inject into the water stream. So really exciting. And then now you can put that all on during the growing season when you actually need it and not put it on maybe multiple years in advance. We did a demo out at Farm Science again, and this is using soybeans, and we know that might not be typical, but this allows you to be able to see it, and this gets injected. You drop that into the tube, and it comes down, and you can see that those beans flowing by, and that gets put back into the water stream. And there's different drops that you can use out at the unit. And on one side here, we're going to demonstrate the drops are a fan drop, so more of a seeding drop. And if you look, you'll be able to see those beans coming by. And those are those white specks and getting, quote, seeded into the canopy. This was obviously demonstration purposes and see those soybeans. And then to demonstrate on the other side, we had a more conventional where a wide drop. And as we ban those nutrients, you can see those nutrients right at the base of the plant. And that can be, will be in an aqueous water solution and be taken up by the plant. So really exciting when you start thinking about both your liquid and your granular products, being able to put those on in growing season. Ryan Schmidtmeyer had this, and he was able to seed a alfalfa crop completely from the rain unit. And this is what that looks like. So he actually planted this in August during the drought, and this is the results of that that seeding. And I think if you asked any dairy farmer to seed in August during a drought, no one would do that. But this is that crop that he got and was able to water it in, and had excellent results. As we talk about cost share, we've been working on this with NRCS and H2 Ohio, our funding sources, but also working with these two entities as well as the EPA to look at how this will be regulated, because this is a low value machine, something we've never seen before. We've had quite a few field days and meetings and a lot of education going on, and are hopeful this will be cost shared